Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
Today we have two very special guests with us, Dr. Beatrice Chestnut and Uranio Paes. Welcome, guys, to Personality Hacker. We're glad you're here.
It's great to be here.
Dr. Beatrice Chestnut and Uranio Paes are our Enneagram go-to experts. Anytime we have Enneagram questions, Enneagram things that we want to talk about, all of this stuff. They both run the Chestnut Paes Enneagram Academy and travel all over the world doing live events, teaching. They're creating new programs online. They have a thriving Enneagram Academy that is reaching out and helping people understand more about the Enneagram all the time. And in fact, you guys are getting ready to release a book soon, which is really cool. At the time of this recording, you're still in the process of getting that published. You've already written some books, Beatrice, before. And we're glad to have you guys to talk about some Enneagram issues today.
Of course, this is not the first time you have been on our podcast. As Joel mentioned, you're a go-to Enneagram experts. But before we hit record, we were having a conversation about how huge the Enneagram has gotten, how it's just sort of exploded in the collective unconscious, and how there's been like a real embracing of the system, probably in a way that you guys have never seen before.
That's true. It's become very popular, and it seems like a lot of young people are really into it, which I think is great. It's been wonderful to see how people have gotten really interested in it and the way it's really spread. And there's a lot of creativity happening with the Enneagram right now.
One of the challenges, though, that I see happening in this, and this is not just the Enneagram, it's Myers-Briggs. Actually, it's any topic that has some more nuance to it. As it becomes popular and mainstream, I'm noticing in a very postmodern world, we lose a sense of the fidelity of the systems we talk about, because anyone with a microphone or a YouTube channel or anything like that can talk about any subject they want, which is, again, like you said, Beatrice, very empowering. It's awesome. It's a great way for people to reach out and be a part of the conversation of something maybe they didn't have access to before. And I also noticed that there's probably ways we can be talking about these systems that are more powerful and helpful to people than just, like a meme you post on Instagram or something you just, like a little quote about type 7s and here's what they're like. And it's like, it's kind of funny and it might be a little bit accurate, but also where's the help in that for somebody that wants to understand more about themselves and their personal growth path? And what I appreciate about some of the work I think you guys are doing with the Enneagram is you're helping create a conversation and craft the right kind of conversation that should be had going forward. And my hope is that through talking about it in the way you guys are talking about it, we're going to influence the influencers, people that are just now waking up to this system that, you've both spent decades studying and mastering in your own lives. And I guess that's something that I see as a really great opportunity here, is steering the conversation in the way we want it to be talked about as type leaders in the type community. And I'd love to hear from you. And what do you think some of the ways that we can be talking about the Enneagram are? What are some ways, if I'm somebody that in my life wants to create a YouTube channel or talk about this or be a part of the Enneagram conversation, how can I best approach it? How can you help me as a person that wants to talk about this think about it in a way that's really empowering for myself and then the people maybe that I'm leading or talking to?
Your question is great, Joel. And I think that B and I try to be a bridge between two different things. One is the more ancient aspect and the roots of the Enneagram system, which come with a lot of wisdom, with amazing ways to promote both psychological and spiritual development. And on the other hand, helping all this new generation know about it beyond what they have been seeing on Instagram or Facebook from most sources. We believe that it's about time for the Enneagram to be of service to more people in the planet. And what we see is that when people leave the more transformational aspect of it aside, then it becomes even a bit dangerous.
Dangerous. Why, Uranio, would you say that it's become dangerous?
Well, Antonia, first, because none of us, the four of us at least, want to see such a deep and important wisdom system become a shallow thing. It would be really a waste of wisdom by all of us as humanity to do so. But also because when we start stereotyping people, and not only using the Enneagram, but also Myers-Briggs and other typologies, they end up not doing a good service for us. Any typology can be good or bad depending on how it's used. And sometimes it produces even more intolerance when people just judge others or say things that are only funny about other types. We have nothing against funny. We also like to have fun with the types, but the number of memes, for instance, about Enneagram types on the internet right now is bigger than interesting content that really helps people evolve.
I think another aspect of what might be dangerous is people thinking they're using the Enneagram to grow when they're really not. It can give people the illusion that, well, I know my type, or I know these different aspects related to my type. And so I must be learning about myself at a deep level, when really people are staying at a relatively shallow level, maybe without even realizing it. And they may not also understand the possibilities that are associated with the Enneagram and knowing your type. They just may not have been introduced to the depth of the Enneagram's capacity to help us understand ourselves and really transform at a deeper level. And it's not always completely obvious when you get introduced to the Enneagram what all the dimensions are that you can have access to really grow.
I've noticed that, at least in people who follow Personality Hacker and are in different type communities, that they wouldn't identify what they're doing as shallow at all. Like, they just want to learn everything. They get all the books and they listen to all the podcasts, and they just keep opening more and more and more information up. Is that also, are you talking about that when you say wanting to go to a deeper level or deeper access, or are you talking about something else that's shallow?
No, I wanna say, Antonia, that this is why we're partnering with you guys, because you take all this subject of personality studies much more seriously than average, and you are all about development. And no matter even what typology you are using, you already do such a beautiful work with Myers-Briggs, helping people, really self-observe and go beyond their patterns. And I just think that, and I'm interested in hearing your opinion, I think that the Enneagram comes up with extra possibilities for people who truly want to come out of the box.
I think your question is a good one. And the way I see it is, someone can have a really sincere interest in the Enneagram, and their intention can be to go deep and learn everything they can. But here's the issue. How do you know what the best Enneagram resources, teachings, theory, and authorities are? There's a lot out there. And I think sometimes quality control can be an issue. How do you know what theory is really going to help you grow? It may be interesting. It may seem like there's something to it, and maybe there is, but how to tell the difference, how to discern between what aspects of the Enneagram system, or what parts of theory, or what books and teachers are really the most effective ones.
Yeah, that's actually a challenge in our world in general, right? I mean, how do you know what philosophy, what thought to follow in any category, on any place? As we're in this postmodern world, we have these like little experts. You can see it with like doctors, right, who are medical professionals, who get people that come in after reading something on WebMD trying to self-diagnose and say, well, here's what is going on with my health. And the doctor's like, okay, yeah, but I'm like the doctor here. And not that you should just blindly follow doctor's advice, but they have medical training, they have reference experiences and things of this nature. So it isn't just in the Enneagram, Beatrice. This is something I think that in our postmodern world, everyone's dealing with. A lot of people that come with expertise and reference experience are realizing, oh, this is a new world. This is a new way of being. People are not necessarily looking for the quote unquote expert at the top. They're looking for something that personally resonates with them. And I think the question you pose is, how do you know? That's a really interesting question to chew on.
I think that's a great analogy that you made to WebMD. My aunt is a nurse practitioner, and it drives her crazy when her patients come in and they've seen an ad for some pharmaceutical treatment on television, and they come in convinced that they need that thing, when really it may not pertain to what's going on with them at all.
Yeah, I also agree with what you're saying, Joel. I think it's a universal problem, especially nowadays. But the thing is, the Enneagram is going through a boom that most of us have been waiting for a long time to happen. And it's the thing of the moment. So we are experiencing a lot of misinformation out there. Not only about the 9 types, but also about the ways they need to grow and about a more comprehensive dimension of this system, which, as we said before, is ancient.
I think this is just generally a really interesting conversation, because I think about this too. I mean, there's in the typology sort of corner of the internet that we live in, there's, we're not the only people who are talking about Myers-Briggs. Obviously, there's quite a few people who have sort of set up their own little corners and hung their shingles. And people will ask us, well, what do you think about this person who talks about type? And what do you think about this person who talks about type? And everybody's got kind of a slightly different angle. Some people are sort of inventing their own perspectives on the Myers-Briggs system, and other people are taking what's there and filleting it out. And others just keep looking at it from a million different angles. And I feel like as people who have decided to focus on the personal growth aspect of this system, and really any system that we run into, we're going to attract the people who are vibing at our frequency. We're going to attract the people who not just like how we talk about it, but are the people who want it for the same reasons we want it, who really want to grow and develop and use it to sort of figure out leverage points in their life and become better versions of themselves by learning about it. And eventually, I think what happens to a lot of people is they almost wean themselves off of it. They almost get to a point where they're like, they don't feel like they need it for their identity so much, but it's a useful tool that they incorporate in their general work. And that's where we encourage people to go to. But at the same time, Myers-Briggs, while one could argue that it's based on archetypes that have been seen throughout all of history, these different archetypes that have shown up over and over again, it's not as connected to the idea of ancient wisdom and sort of like old Egyptian knowledge and things like that. So we have sort of this philosophical relationship to it in our audience, and just assume that we'll attract, quote unquote, the people, not the right people as in they're good people, but like the people who are right. We're right for them and they're right for us. So as people who are stewards of the Enneagram and this idea of ancient knowledge, we're working with something that's kind of, quote unquote, newer technology. How do you feel about it as stewards of something that's a little bit more ancient?
I think it makes it even more important to be accurate, to give what you do integrity, to do your research. When we're teaching, we always try to be learning ourselves, to be open to new information, to be developing theory and conversation with each other, so that we can be deepening our understanding. And certainly there's a lot of mystery to the history of the Enneagram, but there's also a lot that we know and a lot of depth. And I think I often tell people to really just look at the credentials of the people that they're learning from. And I think we're just trying to put out there a really good product, a really good pathway for people to find their type, to see how the Enneagram can be applied in really deep ways, to offer what we think is the best theory and back it up and show why we think it's the best theory and how it's connected to sources that tell us something meaningful about the ancient roots. And I like what you said, because I think I'm developing almost a sense of faith that the harder we work to put out just a really quality product, the more will naturally attract people who want to do the deeper work and have integrity in the way they use the Enneagram themselves.
What does deeper work look like? What does that mean? Like, if somebody wants to vibe with that, what is deeper work really like? How do you know that somebody is really doing it?
So to add a bit to what B said and answer your question, Antonia, in the past, this kind of wisdom was reserved for people who were initiated in wisdom schools and traditions and would not be public. Perhaps because now it's a very special moment that we are living in this planet. This has surfaced as a more open wisdom for anybody to take. What needs to be preserved, though, is the courage to use it, to be challenged. So people who truly use the Enneagram for what it was created for need to be looking at shadows, need to be looking at deeper unconscious stuff, and interested in waking up from what sometimes B and I call a zombie state. This is why B and I usually offer processes of development more than workshops only, or more than a coaching session. It's about a bigger commitment to a deeper transformation, also in ways that combine psychological and spiritual work, because this is very unique in the Enneagram system. It is about both psychology and spirituality.
As you talk about these, I don't know exactly the word you used, but basically I took away like a rite of passage or a school of wisdom that's not necessarily secretive, but sometimes it can be. It's something behind the walled garden. It's something you come into as a practice, a discipline, almost like probably like an advanced martial art or something where you train as an apprentice or you study to be proficient at something. A lot of these ancient wisdom systems were like that, where you would go and you'd train in a school of thought privately. It wasn't something that was open in public. And the story of the West, Western society, is the democratization of everything, right? Information is free. We democratize everything available to everyone at all times, which is a lot of progress. Like, we've got a lot of good things from that. And I would say that probably one of the things we've lost in democratizing everything is a more careful, curated training process for people, like a school of wisdom of certain ways of learning. I can see a move to start going back that route, like what you're talking about, Uranio, creating a way of learning more than just what you're learning, is what I hear what you're saying in this. Embedded in what you're saying is the process of how you learn is part of what you learn too. It's not just about reading some books or understanding, right? The process is part of it. And that's where you get the reference experiences. That's where you go through the entire making it real for yourself.
Right, Joel. And behind all this, there is an understanding that finding our personality type on the Enneagram system is finding out who you are not. So it's finding out all the ways that we've been deceiving and self-deceiving, getting away from our essential self. But maybe B could explain us a bit more about this.
Well, I think one of the things that happens when people first learn the Enneagram is they can, again, sometimes without meaning to, use it more as a way to affirm their ego self-image rather than move beyond it. As Uranio said, the Enneagram types are archetypes of personality types. And by definition, when we're identified with our personality, when we think we are our personality, we're identified with our ego. And a lot of times we just automatically defend our ego or our self-image. So we get defensive when we feel insulted by someone. That's ego. The real power of the Enneagram is to teach us about our personality type so we can understand what we need to move beyond. We can understand, okay, this is what I'm not, but I think I am, and I'm identified with, and sometimes I even want to beef up or defend or feel better about, who I think I am. But really, the deeper Enneagram work is about recognizing, okay, this is my personality. It's who I think I am, but it isn't me. But I do need to learn about it as a way of rising above it, transcending it. And I think one mark of good Enneagram work is at some point you need to feel uncomfortable. It's not about feeling better about myself. Sometimes people use their Enneagram type as an excuse. Well, I'm a 3, so I'm going to do that. Or as a weapon, like, well, you're just a 5, so you're going to do this. Instead of using it as a portal into a real way of meeting ourselves, seeing ourselves, and recognizing the blind spots we have, recognizing the ways we defend ourselves, and in defending ourselves, really block our growth by saying, well, I just want to feel better about myself. And I think when we're really using the Enneagram in the way it's meant to be used, it's an avenue to see, wow, this is what I'm paying attention to, and this is what I don't pay attention to. This is what I avoid seeing in myself. And I think when we can really have an open mind about encountering a deeper level of ourselves and seeing how we need to actually move beyond our ego, that's when we're really doing the work. And unfortunately, of course, it's just natural for people not to want to feel pain or discomfort. And sometimes that, in a way people don't see, keeps them stuck in their personality, which is by definition a lower level of awareness.
What's coming up for me as you're talking is that, or at least from my perspective teaching Myers-Briggs, is that initial discovery of your personality type does come a lot with it, a lot of like a positive acceptance. You might have been very unwilling to accept elements of who you are, and then you realize that you're not alone. You're part of a group of people who operates this way or thinks this way. And so there's a lot of permission that comes along with it. And when you're talking about sort of people just wanting to stay at that level of learning their type and wanting to hear more about their type and having an idea of now it explains so much, I feel like that is actually a piece of the puzzle. Like that's a step in the process. And what I hear you saying is that it's hard for people to move to the next lily pad. Like that was the first step. And that step feels really good. I think it's one of the reasons why so many people stay in a diagnostic framework. Like I notice that a lot of people who teach type want to keep diagnosing. Like they want to keep figuring out different elements of how you can diagnose your type over and over and over again with adding pieces over here or adding another element over here. And I think it's because the diagnostic phase feels really good. It's like, oh, this explains so much. And it's such a warm, squishy feeling. What I'm hearing you say, though, is that if you stay at that level, that's how you stay shallow, even if you've got a lot of information there, even if there's so much information to unravel and unpack. If you're staying at the self-accepting diagnostic level, you're not using the tool as it was originally intended, which is the next lily pad is, okay, well, I've accepted what is. Now, how do I work on what could be? How do I get to the best version of myself, which now moves into a phase that doesn't feel as good as acceptance. You know what I mean? It's not warm and squishy. It's kind of cold and wet and sort of awful feeling.
Yes, I totally get what you say, Antonia, and I love it. And just to add something to it, in the 70s or from the 70s, there was, this movement pushing back the very confrontative methods that were being done by then. And they had to do, especially in the 80s and 90s, they had to do with being soft and gentle in all therapeutic world. And that was great because lots of things had been truly exaggerated before. However, I think that we went too far with that, and we created a whole mentality that we shouldn't be pushed beyond a certain point, and people started to believe that self-development had to do with well-being only, like feeling good about myself as soon as possible, which is not that. If we are committed to truly transforming and realizing all our potential, we need to understand that after a very long and important period of self-acceptance and being gentle in our moves beyond our egos, we need to confront a bit more what our shadows are. And we need then at that point to grow beyond the mere curiosity with things like typing people, and also understand that working on our personalities is not only to be more functional in life. And the Enneagram this way is not a theory of behavioral traits. It's not even a theory of motivations behind those behaviors. It's something very deep. We talk on the Enneagram, in our case, we teach it this way, about deeply rooted ego structures in 3 centers of intelligence that are connected to the body, the heart, and the head. And the potential for us to operate not only from those centers in their lower aspects, but growing to a point of opening up the higher dimension of those centers of intelligence. So we need to look at things that are hard to look at, like what we call the passion of type, which is a very important emotional vice that each of the 9 types have. And also this fixated belief or limiting belief in the world that is what we call the fixation. And when we get too distracted in explaining lots of traits of each of the 9 types, we miss the point of talking about these 2 very central aspects.
I think when Uranio and I do work with people in like our in-person retreats, and now we're doing more of this online, of course, we try to combine supporting people a lot and making them feel safe with also helping them learn how to confront the ego. And we believe that we need both approaches combined, because if it's just about making you feel good or having compassion for yourself, which you absolutely should, that's a necessary ingredient in the process. If you stop there, you may not get very far. And like you're saying, Antonia, there's so much incredibly interesting and insightful information that comes from learning your type. But then how do you take that on the road? How do you use that to deepen your experience of yourself such that you move beyond the self-limiting patterns that are the personality? And in a new book that we're writing right now, we're framing the Enneagram in terms of the archetypal hero's journey. And I think that's a great way to think of what we're talking about in terms of using the Enneagram for real, genuine depth growth work, if that's what you want, because it's necessarily about kind of taking on a kind of growth journey, sort of traveling a path of development that leads from getting new insights about yourself, having that be really mind expanding and fascinating and enlightening, but then going to, as you say, the next lily pad and the next lily pad, which is about encountering deeper aspects of ourselves, blind spots, parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at, parts of the shadow, and really contending with those things as a way of knowing ourselves at a more deep level so that we can really consciously make a conscious shift and stop avoiding parts of ourselves we don't want to see, but through getting to know them and integrating disowned aspects of ourselves, we actually move beyond the personality, beyond the ego's need to defend itself, and really allow ourselves to realize what might be called the true self. It's in a way going from the false self personality to the true self, which is more of who you actually really are in all your potential.
And B, this is why we came up with our own model of levels of awareness connected to the Enneagram system, so that we could talk about a more vertical dimension within each of the 9 types when it comes to development. So there are different levels of being or levels of self-realization within each of the 9 types. And people can be very different depending on the level they are in.
As you guys are talking, it comes up for me that a life focused on feeling good is a pretty shallow life. Like, that's kind of how I see the world at this point. And somehow we got this assumptive message in our world, our culture, that our metric should be to feel good. That's what we should be looking toward in all things. And it's been my understanding through my own personal growth journey that feeling good is a really bad metric for me, because I miss so much opportunity to do deeper work on myself and work through some of the harder issues. Like, if my metric was just to feel good, when my 13, 14-year-old son and I get in an altercation, I can help parent him better. I'm going to just back off of being a good parent because it makes me feel bad to be a good parent. I feel better not being a good parent. So if that's my metric, I'm not going to be giving the people in my life what they need either. And I'm noticing that, like, one of the bloodhound trails that I sniff is when people sell me a bill of goods that I can always feel good and be happy with any system I learn or a discipline I approach. I'm like, there's probably, that sounds too good to be true. Like, if there's real work to be done, it's not going to always feel good. In fact, I don't even know if I should be feeling good all the time. I don't know if that should be my metric. There's probably other metrics we can connect to this. I think we should know how to feel good. I think we should know how to do that. I should know how that feels. And I think that's a good thing to strive for sometimes, but that's not the only metric. I think there's other things going on here. And I appreciate the fact that you're weaving in some of these, what you call vertical growth paths, Uranio. We've talked about on a previous podcast, the idea between horizontal models, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, designating you a certain type on a horizontal framework. But then there's a vertical growth. Once you know who you are, the you are here dot of your life, now there's a pathway for growth forward on a more vertical scale. And I think that's really wise to weave some of that stuff in. So just maybe give me a quick overview. What does it look like for this idea of using the Enneagram on a hero's journey? Like, what is that? How does that play out? If I was somebody listening right now that was like, wow, that sounds great. I can't wait to get your book and go down that road. How will that look for that person? Or how will that look for me, even, that I want to pursue that path?
Well, I'll say a couple things, and then maybe Uranio can also give his thoughts. For one thing, it means there are different tasks at different stages of what we might call a journey. So when you first learn your type, there are going to be certain growth steps that are appropriate for where you are right then. And it'll be important to focus on certain things related to your type. And it's interesting what you say about feeling good versus feeling bad. I think what you said is really well articulated. The only thing I would change is I think it may not be good and bad. It may be like discomfort versus comfort. Because, for instance, there's one type that actually feels good feeling bad, right? And so it's
fair enough. Yeah.
Because I get what you're saying, because I think we tend to, all things being equal, want to stay in our comfort zones. So in the beginning of the path, there may be certain things that it's just about observing them. It's about observing patterns. It's about noticing what you're doing habitually, what you're paying attention to, and what you're avoiding. And it's really important at that first stage to confine yourself to observing. If you try to do too much too fast, it's going to backfire. You may not be ready to do certain growth steps. Some people get very ambitious early on, which is great, but you're going to get farther faster if you are able to focus on what's the most important thing I need to really direct my energy to learning right now about myself, or learning to do differently, or just watching in myself. And then once you do that for a while, there's going to be a further growth step that comes at the next stage. That is where it's going to be the right time to do something different. So I think one thing we get at with these levels is that for each type, and it's different for each of the 9 types, there are specific things to focus on depending on where you are and what growth work you've done before, and just what the timing is for you.
Yes, what I would add to this, B, and I thought it was excellent what you explained, is that when we teach, Joel, we try to be very precise, accurate in saying what it really takes for someone to truly commit to psychological and spiritual development. We need to fight many times against a whole culture that has been created, mainly through best-selling books on self-help, I'd say, that promise instant rewards and, people feeling well and seeing light right away. And it's not like this. We can't lie anymore. Then what we do is to guide people through the different stages and challenges that happen, and focusing on the work that will bring them closer and in a fast way to their truer selves. So we teach things like true self-observation. People don't really know what that is and all that it entails, and how to use what we call the inner observer in our advantage. Also, specific methods on how to get frustrated with your own ego, and how much to confront it and when. So there's so much that we need to talk about that not always is talked about. And we're trying to do that.
And then we also try to leverage different aspects of the personality. For instance, the instinctual level. We help people tune into what's going on at the instinctual level versus the emotional level versus your mental patterns. But we also work a lot with subtype, and some of the approaches to the Enneagram, I think, don't type accurately and don't always have a pathway into this deeper work in the right order, because they don't have this subtype element in the way that we do. We apply the Claudio Naranjo's approach to the subtypes, and it gives a beautiful window in at the beginning of the journey into what your specific patterns are at an even deeper level than type. And so things like that we leverage in different ways to help people get just a very targeted and accurate sense of, what do I need to be looking at now? What exactly should I focus on to have the most effective results for, my growth at the place I am now?
Yeah, I think your guys' work with subtype is probably, it was probably one of the biggest ahas I had in my relationship with the Enneagram. So I think it's super powerful.
We will be right back. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker. Now back to the show.
I don't mean to derail our conversation. I'm just on sort of taking a meta perspective of your position in the Enneagram world and our position in the Myers-Briggs world, and sort of talking about, how do we get people to want to dive into these deeper layers for growth. And then I started thinking, well, we live and breathe this stuff. So we're almost like, if you were going to take a corollary into the health and wellness, industry, we're like bodybuilders, but we're doing it with sort of mental hygiene or mental growth and development, personal development. And when most people look to somebody who's a bodybuilder or somebody who's like super into health, maybe on the cover of Self magazine or whatever, they just want to lose 10 pounds, right? Like they just want to get rid of that last 10 pounds of belly fat, or they just want their knees to feel a little better. Most people's access points to physical health is that they want to get rid of a pain that they're experiencing. And they're not really super, super, super into like bodybuilding or shaping their body in a certain way. And I was thinking that for those people who enter the type world, I think most people have something around their identity that is a pain point, whether it's interfacing with the outside world or whether it's something about themselves that they're struggling to accept. Getting into personality types is a way to sort of address whatever is the personality or character version of like their knees hurting or that last 10 pounds of belly fat or whatever. And I think that we really want people to go super deep, but do you think that there's like sort of a place? I mean, is that, again, I don't mean to derail our conversation. I'm just kind of going into a place that now that we're talking about this subject and we have you here, I would love to get your opinion on. When people just want to do that piece of it, do you think that there's a place in the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs for somebody who's at that level? And do you think that it's like a really good place to start? Because once you do get your needs, quote unquote, taken care of, now you're sort of incentivized to go, okay, what else is something that maybe needs to be addressed? Or once you lose that 10 pounds, you're like, what else could I do? Could I shape my arms a little bit better? Or does that make sense?
Yeah, Antonia, let me share a belief we have, B and I have, and also something that became our approach. Although we are a lot about integrating deepest shadows and doing the more general inner work, we always start with a particular pain that each person is having. And we believe this is not only useful, but also essential, because the Enneagram is a very good map, but it's not the territory. And the territory needs to be rooted in actual experiences that people have. And we usually find out what a particular trauma, obstacle, or key defining moment of the person's life was. And we help them from there. However, we make sure that we connect that back to what their personality is and all the intricate aspects of it, and make sure that the person not only solves that issue, but also gets appropriated of a whole formula for dealing differently with the world from then.
And I also think, coming out of what Antonia said, it makes me think, everybody gets to decide what they want to do in terms of their personal work. Like you're saying, some people maybe don't really want to do the really deep inner work. And I think everybody makes the choice for themselves, and all choices are valid. And I like your analogy, Antonia, because it's like we're personal trainers. And as personal trainers, our bias is that everyone should work as hard as possible to get in the best shape they can possibly be in, right? But maybe someone doesn't really want to get in shape. Maybe they don't want to go to the gym. Maybe that's not what they aspire to. And we always teach that we shouldn't judge people based on whether they want to do deep inner work or not. Everyone gets to decide for themselves. And you're right. Sometimes people's goals are more limited. And I think that's fine. I think we have a lot of, because we love the Enneagram, we sometimes say we don't really want people to use it shallowly. But again, it's, I feel like I need to get over my high standards sometimes. It's like, okay, well, if someone just wants to use it to go so far, maybe that's okay. Maybe not everyone has to do the depth work. But I also think that kind of like what we started with, in terms of the world today, I think we are much in need of a higher level of consciousness if we're going to solve some of the big problems that we're facing, like climate change and political division and systemic racism and sexism and things like that. And, I have a bias that when we each do our personal growth work, when we each do everything we can to be more self-aware and have more empathy for others, that helps us all grow in a way that helps us be able to be more in a place where we can solve these big problems. That said, I've needed to learn not to judge people who don't necessarily want to dive into the Enneagram and use it to, find as much in it as someone else might, or as I might.
I think to loop it back around to the beginning of this conversation, when we talked about sort of setting up, we talked about how to talk about these things, right? Like Joel was mentioning, if you end up being somebody who's a leader in the type community, or, somebody we've put ourselves in positions of leadership, right? We kicked on a microphone and started talking and assumed people would want to hear us. And so as people in that position, I think it is actually responsible for us to keep reminding others of how deep it can go, because it's not about necessarily insinuating that everybody should have the same motivation and intent that we do. Like I don't think everybody should live and breathe typology. Like that's what we do, but we've set our life up that that's what we have to do. I think though that when something becomes so much a part of the collective unconscious, like Enneagram is becoming, Myers-Briggs has kind of been that way, but it's never quite had. I think Enneagram is experiencing something very unique for it. Myers-Briggs had a little taste of this in like the business realm, particularly in the 80s and 90s. But I think for Enneagram, this is kind of unprecedented in how many people are sort of adopting it. And whenever an idea or a concept or a system gets almost energetically dispersed, right? Like it gets dispersed among huge throngs of people. It can't help but lose some of its fidelity. And so I think letting people use this tool, quote unquote, but recognizing that people are going to use this tool however they choose to, I don't think is necessarily something we're placing judgment on. But I think there needs to be a very strong message or signal that gets sent out while personality types and that kind of thing have these renaissances or these, sort of mass appeal. Just a signal, a beacon that goes out repeatedly to go, remember, this is based on something that goes pretty deep. So anybody who's interested in that, there are people out there that are willing to go there with you or sort of guide you to those deeper spaces. So it's not even, I think, so much a judgment as it is just making sure that signal is out there as people, pick up this idea and sort of play with it in their hands and either set it down or keep it. For those who choose to keep it, I think it's important that they know that there's some place really kind of incredibly special you can go with this. And there are people who have spent decades building mastery around it to show you just how far the rabbit's hole can go. And I think that signal needs to be on repeat. I think that signal needs to be sent out, often in multiple channels. And so then the benefit of the Enneagram getting spread will make it so that not everybody's going to be into the Enneagram in the same way they are now in 10 years, right? Like it might be a system du jour. Who knows? Myers-Briggs has gone through a couple of those. And every time that happens, it's almost like casting a net out. And then you're going to have a certain amount that sort of get captured in it and are now in the Enneagram, sort of the Enneagram obsession bubble. And then know that there's a really sort of profound place it can go that can, really move the needle in your life.
Yeah, this is profound. And I would just add, Antonia, that sometimes it's not even a matter of choice for people. Just a few people who are ready when they learn about their Enneagram types or their Myers-Briggs types, they get triggered in something deeper. And they simply go through a process of transformation and they start becoming different and they need better guidance without choosing any of that. It's as been they are pushed into that. And we love working with those people.
I do think you need to be motivated to do the deeper work. But I really love what Antonia said about putting the signal out there, because I do think that that's the way we think of what we do. We want to put it out there that there is a path that leads to deeper work. And I love what Uranio said. I think some people, they get to a point in their life where there is no, they can't make any other choice but to take a path that leads deeper into themselves. And certainly there are threats with what I've sometimes heard described as the McDonaldization of the Enneagram. When it gets really spread out really far and wide, it's no longer taught in secret schools, passed on from master to student. But I think we need it in the world right now. And I think it's out there for people who are ready, for people who are motivated, for people who maybe go through a difficult thing in their life, like a loss or a breakup of a relationship or depression, where they get to a moment where they need something. And I like the way Antonia said, like putting it out there as a beacon so that people who need a pathway that really works can find it. And that's what we're trying to do is create a really high quality pathway so that people can get more fidelity in terms of their understanding.
I think I agree with everybody talking about this a little bit, and I'm realizing the benefit in things being non-ubiquitous. This idea you talk about, McDonaldization, I think that, so meditation's like this, right? Meditation has a deep, ancient master to student dynamic. That's how you used to learn meditation. Like thousands of years ago, you would go and study meditation with a master and you learn it. And now we have like apps on our phone. We plug headphones in and we do a 5-minute meditation in the morning. It's a much different experience with meditation than the ancients had with it, right? It's a very different, it's McDonaldized. It's been distributed to everybody. You just put headphones in, it's done for you. Push a button, it's done for you. And there's something lost in that. There's something gained in that too. More people are probably interested and attuned to mindfulness, to being in a meditative state, to doing meditation in their lives. And maybe it gives them an access point for deeper understanding, or maybe it lets them off the hook. Maybe they say, well, I already meditate. I don't need to go study further down the road. So it raises some questions for me to say there's probably some benefits and some challenges anytime we distribute wisdom or ancient wisdom, and again, I go back to what I said before, it's not just about what you're learning, but how you're learning it. That's got to be a key to the things we learn in our lives. One of the things we tell our students all the time in our profiler training course and our profiler coaching course is we say reference experience trumps everything. Like if you get reference experience, that takes all the knowledge in your head and applies to something real. And now it becomes real to you as a person. And what's so interesting to see our students in the profiler training experience want to pursue personal growth more because they've worked on calibrating a skill set that has reference experience in the real world. It's like this self-feeding cycle for them. It's really a powerful tool of how you learn. And one thing I love about the way you guys approach this at your live events, it's very visceral. It's very live. It's very hands-on and tangible. The way that, I mean, in one of your events that we came to, a workshop you had, it was private, invite only, because this isn't for everybody, but you actually laid out an Enneagram map on the ground. And when each person would come up to do some work, Uranio would lead them around and stand them on their Enneagram symbol and move, and their number, and move them across the symbol in different ways, almost viscerally, kinesthetically accessing something. It was a weird experience. And when I say weird, I don't mean bad. It was just a very different experience than the way we typically learn in our Western, academic, everything's digital. You just read it out of a book and take a test and then you know the subject. It was very practical. And I love the approach you guys bring to that, because I think that's the wisdom. That's the wisdom of these systems, is making them real for people in a way. And then what I look at from the other element is as leaders, I see a vacuum of leadership everywhere in the world. I think it's pretty obvious. It's not, you don't have to be very insightful to see a vacuum of leadership. And in the type world, because typology is only going to get more prominent. Like typology, I'm convinced it's going to be an industry into itself eventually, whether it's doing online tests and psychometric data for companies. Some people are going to be going that route. Some people are going to the personal growth route. Some people are just going to apply it to themselves. But self-help and personal growth and typology are going to merge. It's going to become one of the big industries on the planet, because as we get more fragmented, as we get more postmodern, and we lose our institutions and our schools of thought, we're going to need something to latch onto to make sense of our world. And I think typology is going to be that thing that people lean to. And so it's up to people that have leadership abilities, in my view, that can set the tone, set a vision for how to talk about these things, how to learn these things, not just what to learn, but how to learn them. That's going to be so critical. Otherwise, it could be hijacked by who knows what energy. Maybe it's malicious, maybe it's not, but it doesn't matter. If we don't have leadership helping to craft the way this can be done, I feel like that big industry might be bad for the planet, not good for the planet. That's kind of how I see it. I mean, I went off on a big tangent of my opinion here, but this is like why I get up every day and do Personality Hackers, because I can see this vision in front of us that we have to, as type leaders, help shape this narrative, or the narrative will just take its own form and go all rogue.
So I'm glad you mentioned leadership, Joel, because I actually see that there is a generation of new leaders that are taking on their role in this way and doing it well. And I see this in the fact that so many young people have gravitated toward the Enneagram, or learning about it, or hungry for knowledge. And many of them I see as really doing their work. And I think that's the message we try to put out there over and over again is, if you love the Enneagram, if you're drawn to it, that's great. And here are things for you to know about how to take your learning to a deeper and deeper level so that you can be the leader that the world needs you to be right now, whether it's in teaching the Enneagram or just learning about yourself to apply your gifts somewhere else.
Minimum self-leadership. What's nice about these tools, especially for growth and development, is that it gives people a really good map for self-leadership. And even if a person doesn't feel called to be a leader of others, I think we also have a dearth of people really knowing how to set their own path and how to keep themselves on a disciplined path. So I like using these systems in that way because it helps people create that path.
Somebody that is listening right now, maybe they're new to the Enneagram, maybe they're a new listener, maybe they've listened for a while and they're like, wow, this all sounds great. I've got so many ideas. You guys are stimulating my mind in so many ways, and I've got a renewed maybe passion for the Enneagram. Where can a person really start? Like, what would you recommend? Again, action is key, right? Reference experience is key. To take action right now, they click off this podcast and they go do what? Like, what is the step that they can do in their life?
So I think one of the things people can do to gain an on-ramp into the Enneagram work is to find some good sources to learn through. Certainly, there are some good books out there. Increasingly, there are online programs. We've created some online programs. We're partnering with some other great people to create more online programs. But find a good source, a reliable source, and really explore the different aspects of the system and see what sparks your interest. And I think finding your type can be tricky in the beginning if you don't know it yet, but stick with it and really use the process of finding your type, not necessarily as like finding a test and having the test tell you what you are, but as the first step in a longer process of self-development and self-exploration.
Let's pretend we really like your resources. Where would they find you guys?
Well, we have some online programs right now that we're proud of that can serve as on-ramps at cpenneagram.com. We are in the process of doing an upgrade of our online platform, which is CP Online. And so we have certainly some resources, some beginning level workshops that you can access online. My book, The Complete Enneagram, might be a place to start, as well as the 9 Types of Leadership, if you're interested in applying the Enneagram in a work setting or in working relationships. Those are some of the things that we offer.
Well, thank you guys for being here today. It's great to have you on the show. We're looking to do more work together because we like the Enneagram system so much, and we love your approach that we're looking for ways to continue to partner and create content together that helps people find this on-ramp of the Enneagram in their personal growth. And it's a great addition to the Myers-Briggs understanding that we've already brought through Personality Hacker in a pretty significant way. We think it's a secondary system that doesn't exactly have a direct correlation, but there's a lot of crossover in personal growth issues. So we're excited to work with you guys. Thank you both for being here. And can't wait to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having us. It's always a big pleasure to be in conversation with you about these important things.
Yeah, and I feel like we are in sync with the way we see all these things, and it's a pleasure to be closer to you guys.
So if you've been listening along, now it's your turn to come over to personalityhacker.com, make your voice heard. You've been the fifth person in this conversation, but you haven't been able to talk because you didn't have a microphone. But now you can come over to personalityhacker.com and leave your comment, ask your question, or more importantly, share your story. Maybe you've got a story of your own personal growth journey with the Enneagram. Maybe it's something new for you. You just discovered your type and you want to share that with us and the community here at Personality Hacker. We'd love to hear from you.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. Leave a rating and review for us on iTunes. That really helps us out a lot. You can go check out Dr. Beatrice Chestnut's books at Amazon, I'm sure all major retailers, and I cannot recommend The Complete Enneagram enough. That was a game-changing book for me, so go check it out.
My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker.